Okay, everybody, grab our seats. So what a fantastic start to the day so far. It's been, for me, I know many of us, having somebody actually go through this stuff, especially the technical things in some detail and show how they work, is really, really useful. So we're now going to have Dr. Morgan Saletta, who's going to be joining us. Morgan works here at the University of Melbourne. He's an adjunct with History and Science and Philosophy and did his PhD in archaeoastronomy with Gerhard as his advisor. But works in a slightly different part of the university now, but does come in and give guest lectures for us in our archaeoastronomy class. So, Dr. Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Hammer. So Dwayne alluded to the fact that I wear a couple different hats at the university. So if you happen to come across me on LinkedIn, what? Do I have to stand over there? Really? I can't walk around?
I know.
Okay, so I've got to stand right here.
Just so they can see and hear you.
Okay, that's fine. Just remind me, because I'll have to go over here to get stuff. So I'm the director of the Hunt Lab. We're a interdisciplinary research group. But I have a long-standing interest in archaeoastronomy, and that's what I'll be talking about today. Without much further ado, and hopefully we'll be getting outside. So I'll go through some slides and talk a little bit about the work that I've done, and then we're going to go outside and experiment, hopefully get a group photo as well. So. So we're going to be looking at time-lapse and some other photo video techniques that I'll just be sort of referencing. Just a basic background. I'm going to be talking about European megaliths, of which there are many, many thousands all over the place. This is a very rough chronology. Please don't anyone call me out on it. Those centers aren't there. It's indicative. This is an indicative map and chronology. But I want to return to some of the topics and themes that have come up on a number of occasions during the talks so far. And to begin with, something that I'll refer to as the Tom Hawkins paradigm, or the celestial targeting paradigm. And we heard about it earlier. From Clive, and this is essentially something that started with Gerald Hawkins' work on Stonehenge, now basically seen as more or less debunked, but also Gerald Tom's really intensive field work across the British Isles, looking at various sites and alignments, and the idea was that prehistoric peoples were making sight lines and using markers to mark positions of rising and setting positions of the sun or the moon on the horizon, right? Solstices, equinox. I think most of you are probably familiar with that. Now, there were a number of things that were sort of implicit and explicit in this paradigm, right? One of the things that goes along with it is the assumption that people are doing naked eye horizon astronomy, right? That essentially they're using the horizon or markers, right, or artificial horizons of some sort to mark various positions. And this does happen, right? So this, and I think there's good evidence to suggest that at least in some cases this happened, right? As Clive alluded, right, and other people have, right, these are tombs. Many of these are tombs. Some of them many of them were ceremonial sites. So it's much more complicated, right? These are not observatories, right? Nevertheless, aspects of this Tom Hawkins paradigm, this sort of emphasis on sightlines and horizon astronomy, persist today. And that's not to say that it's wrong. It's just that it's very persistent. And there are other aspects of Neolithic astronomy that we might want to consider. So again, another sort of part of the Tom Hawkins paradigm is this idea of Neolithic calendars, and this is extremely pervasive in popular culture and popular interpretations of Neolithic astronomy. This idea that Neolithic people basically had a Celtic calendar and were practicing things like cross-quarter days and Samhain and Beltane and all this kind of stuff. And this may be true, right? We really don't know. I don't think the stone circles, right, or the air hinges are good evidence for this, right? They're not sort of living embodiments of a calendar, right, that you can sort of see here. Nevertheless, very, very influential idea that we come across all the time. Right? Trying to advance. I won't return to the debate over precision astronomy. Clive addressed it quite well. It went on, if you're interested in the history and philosophy of science, as I am, that's my PhD background. There's a really interesting history of science, how these debates took place over time. Some of them were quite acrimonious. Articles titled "Moonshine over Stonehenge" and et cetera. So, but it's something that to be aware of in the history of archaeoastronomy, and I think it's already been spoken about sufficiently. So what I want to really talk about today is ritual cosmology and seasonal illumination of monuments, or at least some monuments. So I'm just going to go through some indicative examples, right? So everyone knows Newgrange, and we'll see Newgrange, right? There's a number of places that have so-called passage mounds, right, that have passages built into the mounds that are illuminated at seasonally important times of the year, right? So on or around the solstice, right, or on or around the equinox, because the sun actually enters for a period of time around that period. Whether it touches the back or not depends on how long the passages are. Let's guarantee it. Please excuse my British pronunciation. I'm a Yank and I have trouble with some of the words, although I do know that Leicester is pronounced Leicester and not Leicester. I put this book up. It's a brilliantly illustrated book, and that's where I actually first encountered some of these ideas many years ago. I think I was probably 17 or something. Martin Brennan's book. Whether or not the archaeology in it is still anything worthwhile, it's brilliantly illustrated. We've got some more illumination, this time with rock art. Maishow, the Orkneys. That's the interior of the structure. So these are all, what I want you to notice here though, before I get to the sites that I've studied, is that these are all mounds, right? These are all passages that are built above ground, they're built into mounds, and it's actually quite obvious that if they're oriented towards a sun rising or sun setting position, that they would be illuminated in some fashion at some point of the year, right? As long as the entrance is not obscured or the horizon is not blocked. This is the winter solstice at Maishow. Gavarnie in France, it's partially illuminated. The sun doesn't go all the way. This is in Bretagne, the coast of Lyon, I think. Solstice, that's the exterior of Gavarnie. And the interior, it's really known for its rock art. It's quite famous for it. Right, and Clive again mentioned as well the really important work of Michael Hoskin. This is published in 2006. Do you remember?
2001.
2001, yeah. So Michael Hoskin and associates, right? People that were interested as well in doing this have looked at thousands and thousands of tombs. Particularly here around the Mediterranean, and noticed, as Clive had mentioned earlier, that there's basically a sunrise or sun rising tradition. But there's a kind of a weird place, right? And that's the Mediterranean coast of France, near Arles, where we find a sunset or sun descending orientation tradition. This is a histogram from Hoskin's work showing the Arles Fontvieille type monuments, and I'm going to go into more detail about those in a little bit. But I just want to quickly raise the idea that most of these monuments, these mounds and passage tombs, if you will, are that, they're tombs, right? They're houses of the dead. And within anthropology and ethnography, right, there's an extensive literature on the relationship between houses of the living and houses of the dead. And one of the things that, if you're working with past cultures for which there is no longer any living tradition, as Gail said, one of the things you have to rely on is basically ethnographic parallel. Right? You can say, well, people around the world do things like this, and it's not surprising that we might see something similar here, where we find these things. Part of that also is related to phenomenology, and the fact that we, as humans, share senses. It's important to understand there are limits to that as well. So this is a personal story. Again, I'm going to copy you, Clive, and I'm going to put up, this is my vanity shot of myself when I was much more svelte and young, 90s hipsters. But there's actually a reason for this. So, other than vanity. So back in the 1990s, right, these are like 90s hipsters in San Francisco. To paraphrase Lawrence Durrell, invisible behind the lens is my partner at the time and now good friend, Sophie Chauveroux, who's French. And Sophie and I had been back and forth between California and France for a couple of years at that point. So this is probably around 1995, I'm going to guess. And then the four of us went on a summer trip where we went from Paris and we drove down through France. We stayed with friends in France, drove like mad idiots across Italy up to Austria and back. And it was on this trip that I encountered megaliths for the first time, and it was kind of a love it at first sight sort of thing, and really piqued my interest. Funnily enough, the other fellow there, Tim, who's looking really sullen, he's now a professor of Roman history, so maybe there's something about that trip. So when I got back to France to study a master's, as a side interest, I started looking pretty heavily into megalithic monuments. And one of the things that my basic hypothesis was that these sites are really well studied in Britain, right? But outside of Brittany, nobody knows anything about megaliths in France. I mean, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but really, I mean, you can go to a small area and say, I'm looking for the dome in this, and people go, what, there's a megalith here? I thought those are only in Brittany, right? And there are some fantastic sites in Brittany, right, for good reason. But there's also thousands of megalithic monuments scattered all across the countryside in France. So I said to myself, look, if there are these passage tombs in Britain that are illuminated at important times of the year, surely there's going to be some, right? Maybe it's a little bit naive, but surely there will be some in France too. So I came across a work by the Oxford archaeologist, I think from the 30s, Glenn Daniel, also a writer of mystery novels, or at least one, called the Prehistoric Passage Tombs of France, or something like that, and came across these maps. Thought, haha. This looks pretty interesting, right? These look like intact passages, right? And they're aligned east-west. That looks more or less like an equinox alignment to me. And so there's 5 of these sites. 4 of them are shown there. They're about 20 meters long. The really, really big site is located on the Montagne de Courde, and Glenn Daniel is shown there in front of it. It's very hard to access. And it's about 100 meters long, a little bit more, carved into the earth. So, importantly, right, these are not mounds, right? There were probably mounds over them at some point, but these are actually dug into the bedrock, the local bedrock, and then they're roofed over with megalithic slabs, so they're partially megalithic, but they are subterranean monuments. Nevertheless, I thought, look, they seem to be on these small hills, right? These are coming out of the Rhone Valley Delta, right? Very flat land. You know, maybe the sun goes into them and illuminates them as well. Oh, there's Glenn Daniel. Just some early, early studies. Is this the right? I think I might have uploaded the wrong slides. That's okay.
We need to jump in and fix that?
Let's see, we'll see, because there are slides in here that I didn't think are in there, and I think that might be the wrong slideshow. In which case, it will be a problem when I get to some of this stuff. But I can
Jump in and grab it in 30 seconds. We want to check.
In just 1 second. Yeah, I'll continue, and then we'll see. I can do a little bit of massaging here. So, in 1998, I went down. So this is pre-Michael Hoskin's work, right? This is before Michael Hoskin pointed out that there were some interesting anomalies right around these sites. I went down and managed to get access to two of them, the Grotte de la Source and the Hypogée dans le Castellet, and document the sun penetrating and hitting the back wall on the equinox, which happens to be my birthday as well. So it was a nice trip. This one, right? To get that sun, I had to climb up into a bush and like separate out the branches to get any sunlight. So it's a common problem, right? Things are overgrown, right? If you're trying to document stuff like this. This is what the entrance to the Grotte de la Source looks like, and that's an elevated shot. Yeah, I'm sure when I uploaded the slides, I accidentally uploaded a different lecture, but I'll deal with that in a second. Yeah, and an aerial view. This is an interior shot, so you can see they're quite big, right? They're trapezoidal. The carving of the walls is very smooth. There's no rock art to be seen. Right? Time-lapse setup. So one of the things that I started to do when I eventually, many years later, started my PhD, which is Gerhard's fault. Gerhard's not here, but anyways, it's Gerhard's fault. I ran into Gerhard at the library. I had come to Australia at the moment. I spent 10 years in France, and I came to Australia, and I was working in the library just right around the corner. And Gerhard comes up to the borrowing desk with a stack of archaeoastronomy books. Are you studying archaeoastronomy? I said, no, but I'm teaching a course on astronomy and world history. And so I started talking to him about my research. He said, well, maybe you should do a PhD on that. That's where it started. So, deciding to capture this illumination required a couple things. Like, firstly, I had to establish this again. Go where you're invited, right? These are on private property, so it's important to establish a relationship with the people that own the property. It took me a number of years before I could get access to more than just those two sites. But it didn't really help much because the other sites are in bad condition, and the very large one, it's so overgrown that you can't see if the sun comes in, so it's not possible to document it. But I thought, look, I'm going to make a time-lapse setup, right? This is something that we can do. We can do this time-lapse setup, and I'll be talking about some of the ways to do time-lapse, and we'll be doing a time-lapse exercise, right? That's going to get you outside. Talk about some of the things. So visually and in terms of documentation, a picture tells 1,000 words, right? It's, we can do lots of stuff on the computer. We can show horizon lines, and it's very important, you can do that. But if you can go to a monument and you can say, hey, look, this is what would have happened if people were going in and ritually interacting with the dead at some point, right? There's ethnographic parallels for that in Madagascar, for example, and other places, cleaning of the bones or talking to people, or burial times. Or for whatever reason, symbolic purposes, right? Having to do with the afterlife. They want this to be illuminated at a certain time of year. This is what it looks like. So I was a starving student at the time, and actually electronics were just more expensive, right? This is back in 2010, I think. So I made a time lapse. Actually, when I say I bought wine for a friend of mine who's quite good at electronics, and we took a household electronic timer, and set it up. The cords are to set it up to a battery and a solar panel and a DSLR, and you can see the setup there, right? So there's a solar panel, it's powering the battery, it's powering the camera, and it's set at 2-minute intervals. I think I've got 2, 5, and 10-minute intervals there. Right, so, and what you get, so I'm a bit of an old school, I learned how to shoot photography and develop photography in an actual darkroom, so I like contact sheets. Right, so this is a sort of a digital contact sheet of some of the photos. This is a selection of the photos going from no light to full penetration to no light again. And what you get, oh, maybe this is the right slide deck. I don't know why I let those other slides in. Panic attack. Interestingly, right, so another sort of interesting thing about these monuments, and I think this is worth pointing out for researchers that might want to go and look at other monuments, right? This phenomenon takes place well before sunset, right? So these photos were taken on the September equinox. This one, not my birthday. And I think the sunrise time around Arles is about 7:30, right? So I didn't put the time on all of these, but I can tell you, so we see the light going in. This is about 5:30, right? So about 2 hours before sunset, right? These are on a slight elevation compared to the Rhone Valley. And again, as the sun is starting to leave, right? One of the things these photos don't do justice, actually, could we just turn off the lights for just a second? Get the videos. They sort of do justice, right? But these monuments, the walls are kind of pale limestone, covered with a little bit of moss. The whole monument is filled with a golden light when this happens. I mean, it is really astonishing how the quality of the light is something that it's like being in a cathedral almost, right? I mean, it's not that big, but it's anyone who's been in a cathedral when the big doors are open and the sun comes in. So as it leaves, see it's sort of a trail of fire. Can we play the video? Yeah. So this video is taken about a week before. So you notice that actually the sun doesn't go as high on the back wall as it does in the next video. So these photos are taken at 2-minute intervals. And then I've assembled them into a video, essentially.
Is that red?
Sorry?
Do you see that red when you're there? Is it red like that?
More golden. Yeah, I think the lights maybe, the picture shows it a bit more red, I think, than your eyes do. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty astonishing.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
It's like someone that's invisible is walking down the lane.
Yeah, it's yeah. What you really don't see though, so like when it touches the back, like the entire area, like to your eye, the whole thing is illuminated, right? This was an old DSLR. It was a borrowed DSLR. It was not perfect, but still, anyways. So that was a week. That was a week prior to the equinox, and this is on the actual equinox. So you see it climbs. It actually is. You can tell how long this was ago because I had a Yahoo email account. It's a long time ago. Yeah, it looks like it gets dark in the front, but it really doesn't. That's really just because of the way the camera captures it. I really like the sort of the trail of fire that goes off the side. It's quite impressive. It has been a while since I visited these sites. I don't remember it being rainbowy. There we go.
That's my technical term.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good technical term. So a couple of things. Actually, I wanted to build on something that Gail pointed out, right? So phenomenologically, right, and Husserl is actually really interesting. We can look at this, right, and say it's hard not to be impressed, right, as a human being, seeing a light and shadow display like that. But it's also important to realize that a lot of megalithic monuments today don't look anything like they looked back in the day, right? They were you see these standing stones that are grouped together, but there was actually a mound, right? So that many of the stones were painted, right? Like modern cathedrals, you walk in and you see these pale, bare stones, but actually they were painted, right, many times, but they're not painted anymore. And there's quite a lot of research showing just how many of these monuments actually had rock art or stuff that we don't perceive anymore. So while I absolutely agree that as human beings, we can make a connection with past peoples based on, our basic genetic and neurophysiological makeup, there are important differences to be seen. Going around in the same circles, sorry I took that from you. I think there's unfinished business with regard to solar orientations, right? So if we return to Michael Hoskin's work, and you see these these azimuth diagrams, right, where he says, look, these monuments are pointed to sunrise or sunsetting, etc. It's when you're up on an elevation, for example, and the sun is setting like this, right? So it's going to be illuminated, right, well before actual sunset, or at that time, or well after sunrise, right? So it's an open my initial take on Hoskin's work was, yeah, maybe equinoxes and solstices were really important for some major monuments, but people were basically just sort of loosely orienting these things towards a general sunrise position. I don't know. I think that actually has to be, more work needs to be done, right? Because if you could go and show that a lot of these sites, right, because of the elevation, are actually getting sunlight much closer to an important date, right, or an important date, a solstice or an equinox, that could be important. And it hasn't really been done, right? I think there's a lot of monuments still remaining in Europe that are intact enough to be able to go to and study and look at from the point of view of illumination, that we could get better data on that. In addition, there's all kinds of other techniques, right? When I was doing my PhD, I was experimenting using SketchUp to make some just kind of generic dolmens that I could just sort of place in a landscape and move around to sort of see how they would work. Now with LiDAR, I mean, if you have an iPad Pro or an iPhone Pro, you can actually, LiDAR and build a 3D model of a monument that could then be potentially, right, imported, right, above my pay grade when it comes to technical ability, but nevertheless. Another option might be something like a citizen science model, where you put out a call to people that live in these areas and say, hey, are you interested? These monuments might be, there may be some intact monuments near you. Would you be interested in going out and filming, right? So that's something that I'd be interested in doing. I work with crowdsourcing in a number of other ways. I find myself, so actually I'm going to put out a pitch here. I find myself in a position which is a nice position to be, which is I've got a little bit more money than I need in terms of my lab budget, and so I can spend a little money on field research for myself on interesting things. So if anyone has interesting collaborations, etc., I'm all ears. I would love to get back into doing some field research on things like this. I'm quite passionate about it, even though I sort of wear a different hat and do other things at the university. Right, so methodology. This is a summer school. I think we can turn the lights back on now. and this, I think, is general methodology. So I'm going to focus on time-lapse. We're going to do a time-lapse exercise, hopefully. Yeah, we'll have time. Photography, right, and videography is an important tool both for whether you're an archaeoastronomer or you're an ethnographer, right? It's a really useful tool. And recently, right, there's been an absolute revolution in terms of the quality of gear that you can get and how cheap it is, relatively speaking, right? So everything's relative. So back in the day when, I handmade this out of a lunchbox and, a home thing, you can easily get something like this now. So this is what's called a construction camera. This one's made in Germany, and you can tell it's made in Germany because it actually comes with an actual paper manual, which is great, instead of a stupid QR code to tell you how to do things. And the build quality is actually pretty good, right? You can strap this, you can mount it on a tripod. It uses AA batteries. It'll last for 6 months, right? And it'll do everything that I made that do. And it's a couple $100. Right? So not out of the range of most research budgets. Small, maybe there's a lot of Chinese knockoffs of those as well. Something else so an advantage of using something like this, right, is that you can do really long-term shots, right? So you can understand how the light and shadow might play around a monument, right? So if you're doing exterior work, right, throughout the year, or inside, right? Basically, 6 months, you replace the batteries, right? Or you could put rechargeable batteries in there. You could do a little bit of you could drill a hole, fix it up to, get one of your friends that knows a little bit about electronics, right? Some 11-year-old, and hook it up to a solar panel, and do it all year round. Right? So, not much. Little GoPros, right? So this is a cheap knockoff of a GoPro. Won't do it for as long, right? But if you want to do things, you're there for, you're recording during the day, right? And then you're recording the next day, you're taking it home at night, right? That'll get you really good footage, right? These things, right? I mean, it's unbelievable what you can do with a smartphone in terms of videography and scene setting, right? So, for example, this is a smartphone gimbal. I can't use it very well right now because I'm going to be doing this. But if you want really steady footage, right, as you're going up and down and moving around, this will get you basically cinematographic type steadiness with your smartphone. Again, I'm not selling any of this, right? I'm not making money on it, but like, maybe 120 US or something, right? It cost me 150 Australian. So not a lot. And that's 3-axis gimbal, right? So it does everything you want, right? It's actually got time-lapse. It's got a little app on your phone. It can do time-lapse. It can do the whole 360 really smoothly, right? Not up and down. But if you're on a budget, this is like a selfie stick with a one-dimension gimbal, right? Which will get you really steady footage like this, or like this, right? It's not shaking, and you can basically make sort of documentary quality footage just with your phone, right? Especially the more, I've got a really old iPhone, but with the new ones, right? And you set it at a high res. So we're really sort of living in a time of an embarrassment of riches. Now the other thing that you can do, which back in the day, getting aerial photography of any sort was quite a challenge, but you know, you can, that's a drone, right? It unfolds. This is like a semi-professional level one. You can put in GPS coordinates and set it on trails and stuff, but I'll take out the toy one. I don't know how to fly this one yet very well, so I'm not going to take it out and fly it. But when we go outside, I will take the toy drone, right, which is like unbelievably cool. It will follow you around. I can put it up in the air, it takes off from my hand. It will follow me around like a cameraman and either spotlight my face as I walk forward or go behind me, and I can record using my phone or a lapel mic, and it automatically cuts out the noise of its engine, right? It screams a little bit like a banshee, but it cuts it out, right? And it's like but it'll do your aerial shots for you, right? It'll do a droney, it'll do an orbit, and it does it all automatically off your smartphone, right? You don't even need a remote control for it. It just kind of does it. We'll take it out and do a group photo when we go out and do the thing. So quick methodology. I should really hurry because I'm an academic and I tend to blather on, but we do want to get outside. I want to get everyone outside. It's actually a nice day. Methodology is important. You got to plan your shots. Stellarium and stuff can help you try to find sites that might have this kind of phenomenon. Plan for extra batteries, solar panels, and I don't mean those little chargers with the little the panel on it. You need a real solar panel, the kind you take camping. Document your shot, archive your data, right? All this kind of stuff. Probably good practice to use sort of archaeological best practice. I've got some markers for people for their things. Do as I say, not as I did, right? When I was doing my field work, I was actually a little bit lazy about this and I really regret it. But I've got a sample form that all of you will be using for your activity. I've already gone through that. Yeah, so this is just another time lapse. This is taken in the redwoods in California. So this is just to show you what you can get off your phone. Like this is an old iPhone, right? This is just like the single lens one. This is my friend's view, bastard. In California. So time-lapse activity. So those of you that are online, we're going to do an activity. I encourage you to go and do an activity as well. We're going to do a time-lapse. We're going to use our phones because it's really easy. You can open your camera and there's actually a time-lapse thing if you have an iPhone. But we're going to do it in groups. So somebody will have a smartphone. Make sure somebody's got a smartphone. Now, time-lapse with an iPhone, if you're not using an app, and I'm not going to get you to download an app because it's just, I mean, you can if you want. And there are apps that give you a lot of control. The native iOS one doesn't allow you to set the interval. So basically, the longer you record, it always generates a video something like 20 to 40 seconds long. And it just it dynamically adjusts the intervals, right? That's a problem if you're really trying to record stuff and be really rigorous about it. So you can use apps that will give you control and allow you to use an interval. I'm not going to get you to do that, but there's a bunch out there. But just so you know that. Apparently if you've got a Galaxy Samsung, it does allow you to do that, but I don't have one, so I don't know. But as I read on the internet, who knows, the Google told me. So we're going to do an activity now. I'm going to set this. Do I need to turn it off to set it down?
Just set it down,
Right, so I have for everybody a documentation form. What I want people to do is to get in your groups. Now, you might get into the groups that you were in last night at the table. That would be convenient, right? It would be easy. But you can form your own groups, right? I'm not going to micromanage how you do this. Sorry? Yeah, okay. We're going to go outside. But first we'll go outside. I'll bring my little drone, and as long as the batteries are still working on it, because I was playing with it and I noticed the batteries are a bit low. As long as the batteries are good, we'll go out on the lawn. We'll take a group photo. I'll show you the little drone. And then I'll set everyone loose doing a time lapse. Now, get creative, right? You're not going to find a passage mound anywhere near University of Melbourne. You may find some light and shadow, but actually, just have fun with this, right? I think this is just a fun activity. Get used to using it. Now, I have provided some tripods, right? Because you do really, well, you don't need one. Like that one in Santa Cruz, I just sort of set it up. But there should be tripod / selfie sticks for everybody, how many groups do we have if we set at the, if we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got enough for 7 groups.
I think we only had 4, didn't we?
Yeah.
All right. Now, I talked to Dwayne, and I think that what we'd like is for you to do the time lapse, then upload it to the video drive that Dwayne had provided in one of those emails where he said if you're presenting, provide it, maybe we can re-email that link out.
Yeah.
And Dwayne and I, maybe some other people, will judge them for creative content. All right? Flip a coin and decide which one is best, and we'll give a prize. Probably something like a bottle of wine or something, right? Something small. But
Who's buying that one?
that'll be me. But Dwayne, I thought you said no.
You're talking about all this extra lab money you got floating around.
What's that?
I said you're talking about all this extra lab money you got floating around.
I know that was a mistake.
You all
wasn't
heard it, right?
Yeah. I did offer the one. It was definitely. In your groups, take. I will ask that you use one of the markers, right? You can. What I would suggest is at the very beginning, just take some scene setting shots, right? Just as good practice, right? Fill this out. Say where you are, right? Basic information. Take a shot of it, right? So it's recorded, and then do your time lapse. Just basic good practice, right? That makes it where it's a summer school. We're practicing methodology, right? But then have fun with the time lapse. It doesn't have to be light and shadow. It can be light and shadow. It can be people. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. So for that we've got.
Someone's staying?
Yeah, I'm staying here.
Oh, Dwayne.
Well, we got 45 minutes.
Well,
Bob's people.
I think they might be better with a tripod.
Go.
So I grabbed it.
So you guys talk. I